My parents and others like them just did not know what self-care was, were basically just like in survival mode all the time. Because I was able to see the lack in that, I understand now the importance of me modeling that to my children. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Mindshift Mami Show. I'm your host, Jazri, and today I'm taking things a little bit more chill and getting more into my podcasty era with my headphones in. I'm going to be talking about specifically some of the ways that I was parented as a child and some of the things that I liked about my parents' parenting that I am going to be bringing forward into my own parenting, and some of the things that I'm going to be shifting and doing my own way. I do want to preface this episode by saying that anything that I talk about today or in the future, or if I've talked about in the past, is not intended to shame or blame my parents or any parents in general who maybe feel like they resonate. I firmly believe that everybody is doing the best they can when it comes to parenting with the knowledge that they have at the time and the capacity that they have at the time. Parenting is hard. I don't have all the answers, and I sure don't expect anybody else to. So with that being said, let's get into today's episode. So one of the things I'm really grateful for my parents having done as I grew up was that they were very focused on ensuring we had home cooked meals literally almost the majority of the time growing up. I would say about 95% of our meals were home cooked meals. And while I wasn't always necessarily excited about rice, beans, and chicken or some kind of Dominican dish back in the day, I really appreciate growing up in a household where processed or takeout or fast food wasn't the norm. Having McDonald's back in the day growing up was literally considered like a treat. We just really had it once in a while. And I feel like today it's so much easier to just do that more often for your kids. So knowing that that's how I was raised, that's something that I want to emulate and continue to push forward in terms of just making sure that home cooked meals are the majority of the meals that my family eats. I also appreciate the fact that a lot of our home cooked meals were Dominican food. My parents were born and raised in the Dominican Republic and then came over to the States. So I love having our food as an additional aspect to keep me connected to my culture. And that's something I absolutely want to pass down to my daughter, who is half Dominican. So I really appreciate them feeding me that food and then even teaching me how to make Dominican food. From starting me off early on making rice, beans, and chicken to even, to today, teaching me how to make other dishes. It's such a great way to bond with my parents too. And even my husband, who's Italian and other things like that, loves Dominican food and enjoys learning how to make it and cook it as well. My parents mostly stuck to Dominican dishes, and while I love that, I also just love exploring other kinds of food as well. My husband and I enjoy a wide range of foods, and we want to make sure that our daughter and any future children have that exposure early on as well. For me, even just one example I can think of is I don't think I had sushi until I was like old enough to buy it on my own type of thing. And my daughter, who's 3, has, had sushi plenty of times already. So kind of just things like that, where I'm just at a place in a different time and I have more exposure than perhaps my parents did, where I'm just exposing my kids to different kinds of foods that I actually ended up finding out about and liking later on in life. So for me, it's basically all about a balance. Having Dominican food to keep the culture alive, trying different things, whether they're more plant-based foods and just things that are primarily healthy, while also ensuring at the same time that I don't feel like a slave to my kitchen every day. While my parents home cooked for like 95% of the time, I'm aiming for like a cool 80%. Now, when it comes to discipline, One major change I'm making is refraining from any physical punishment when it comes to disciplining my kids. My parents, like many parents in their generation, had no problem with physical punishment as their form of discipline. In my opinion, and in many professionals' opinions and research that has been proven as of late, physical punishment is just ineffective discipline at the end of the day. There are so many more effective ways to discipline kids, and essentially, physical punishment can end up causing more harm than good in the long term. I have another episode where I actually go into the difference between punishment and discipline and how basically a lot of our parents got it wrong and got it confused, thinking that the two are one and the same when they're really not. And essentially, I'm more focused on modeling the behaviors that I want to see in my kids. And because one of my principles and values in life is to not have my kids think that it's appropriate to hit others or to think it's appropriate for others to hit them, it would make sense for me to ensure that as their parent, I am modeling to them that I too do not put my hands on them or any other people. Otherwise, I would be clearly contradicting myself, and kids really do learn more from a see rather than a tell them. No matter how much you tell a kid to do something, if they see you doing the opposite, that's what they're learning. So yeah, again, just one of the reasons why it doesn't make sense for me personally to be hitting my kids when it comes to discipline. I feel like the subject of discipline and punishment and how our parents used it versus how we look at it now as a different generation is a huge topic in itself. And if you're interested in me doing more of a deep dive or you have any questions or thoughts about that, feel free to let me know in the comments. So this next one is a big shift for me. Modeling self-care. I can count on one hand the amount of times that I can remember my parents going out and just having either a date night with each other or just even going out separately for themselves to just do something for themselves. And that's really sad to me. I just feel like my parents, again, I think this is a generational thing where my parents and others like them just did not know what self-care was, were basically just in survival mode all the time. Because I'm mindful of that, because I was able to see the lack in that, I understand now the importance of me modeling that to my children. When you don't make space for your own needs, it can send a message to your children that you basically don't deserve rest or care. I want to show my children that taking time for yourself is healthy and a necessary thing to do. So with that being said, for me, I make sure to show that I am doing self-care activities for myself around my children. And then as they get older, being more intentional with my husband that we will be taking date nights and having that specific time with one another outside of being just their parents, showing that we two are a couple and have a separate relationship aside from that. I just think that's really important in terms of family dynamics for children to see. Another thing I want to talk about is the concept of quality time as a family. My parents were very family oriented, and I appreciate how tight-knit we were growing up. I feel like my parents didn't give themselves permission to play more, especially my mom. So that's something that I'm doing a little bit differently in the sense of being intentional about making sure I do play with my daughter, in front of my daughter, etc. Even just simple things like dancing or singing in front of your kids. When I think back to my childhood, I don't really remember seeing my mom do things like dance around the house or sing at all. That was not a thing. My mom's thing was cooking and cleaning all the time and telling us to clean. And the way she chilled out was watching her novellas. But I think it's important for our kids to see us enjoying life too, not just always working or cleaning. My mom was always busy around the house, and while I respect that, for me, I want to have a balance because honestly, I get it. I really enjoy cleaning my house. I could do that all day, but I make myself take breaks and have intentional playtime with my daughter, for example. There's a ton of experts like Dr. Amen, who's like a brain doctor and therapist and who has done research on like what makes emotionally resilient children. And he recommends having just 20 minutes of focused, like child-led play a day if possible. And child-led being meaning like you're not the one leading how the game goes, like just letting your kid decide how everything goes, like letting them say everything first and you're kind of just going along. So once I heard that advice, I'm like, oh, okay, let me try this. And while I haven't been perfect, I definitely haven't hit it every day. I've noticed the days that I do commit to it and I'm getting in at least those 20 minutes of play with my daughter, I never regret it. You'll never regret doing it. And honestly, the 20 minutes goes by faster than you realize. And I've also always realized whenever I kind of go past the 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, that's when our kids really kind of get into their flow with their creative imaginations and whatnot. I've had so many funny moments with my daughter when I kind of just, sit down with her in her playroom and we pick up the dolls and we see what story, where she takes us. So I highly recommend that if you're trying to figure out ways to connect with your children. 20 minutes a day, they say. Child-led play. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. And just aiming for that connected time can do a world of difference to raise our kids to be emotionally resilient. So that's what I'm shifting in regards to that aspect. And I will say, while my mom was definitely the more kind of serious one, my dad was very playful with us growing up. And it was great. I loved being able to have a dad like that could joke around and play pranks on and whatnot. I think it's just important for us to, again, keep in mind, are we being too serious? Are you being too serious with your kids as of late? When was the last time you danced around with them, you sang with them, did a little jokey joke, played pranks together? We just have to remember and realize that these are the moments we remember with our parents, we remembered. So let's make sure we ourselves aren't getting too busy with our kids and make sure we're leaving room for fun. Something random that my parents did that I will be doing. Oops, sorry, microphone. My parents were super strict when it came to like me having basically any kind of social life all my years up till high school. And while some of it I don't agree with, like they were strict to the point where I barely ever got to go on field trips and things like that. I never had friends over the house. Didn't talk on the phone. Yeah, like they were super strict. But one thing I do agree with in terms of strict parents is the fact that they didn't allow us to go to like sleepovers and stuff like that. Like, I agree with that. And that's something that I'm going to be bringing forward with my kids. Like, there's just something about my child not being under my roof at night that doesn't sit right with me and feels like it's not a necessity at all. So I completely agree with that. I am grateful that they were protective like that and weren't letting me out in these streets. So yeah, that's something that I'm definitely appreciating. I'm going to be bringing forward. With that being said, I am likely going to expand more in the sense of allowing my kids to have more of a social life in the sense of their friends coming over our house. They are more than welcome to come over here. And then just getting my children more involved in extracurricular type activities. So even if it's not just like a flat out social life, they don't need a whole social life and, at a young age. But I wish I was able to have gotten more involved in extracurricular activities, whether it was sports or even like learning a musical instrument or something growing up. I think that's so valuable in so many different ways and so many different reasons for kids. So that is something that I'm definitely going to be implementing with my children. Finally, one of the biggest shifts I'm going to be making in my parenting is about communication and how I will be over communicating to my kids versus under communicating. I feel like there were plenty of times growing up when my parents kind of just like assumed me or my siblings should know things when we just literally had never been taught them before, or just like did not know, because I feel like parents tend to forget that kids are like literally doing life for the first time. For me, I just see the value and importance in just over explaining and then over communicating things to my kids. Again, I'm thankful and lucky enough to know in this day and age how important and helpful that is actually for your kids to learn how to speak sooner and just to be basically start getting their intelligence a lot sooner when you start to explain things to them at a very early age. So like to the point where like when they're still in diapers and infants and you're saying, okay, now we're changing your diaper. Let's pick up your left foot and let's put down your foot and here's the sock. Like that's the kind of stuff that I was doing with my daughter. And then now at this point, when she's 3 going on 4, that over explanation and over communication looks like explaining to her why she can't have that snack that she wants at that certain time, because we are having dinner at this time, or, just going into the details of like why she can't do certain things, why she can do certain things, why we're going to go do certain things. I feel like growing up, what a lot of kids got was like the because I said so type of response. I'm sure it's very common today too. And I get it. Sometimes it's kind of like, we're not going to be perfect. I think I said because I said so today to my daughter, because she just kept saying, why? And I was just like, guys, I said so. But generally speaking, that is not my response to her. And I go through the explanation of just giving her basically the respect of understanding why she can't do something, why she can't. Like, she's a person. I believe everybody deserves to know the reasoning behind things. And we also have to think about what we're modeling to our kids when it comes to this, because think about it. If you're training your kid to accept answers in life without a reasonable justification, we have to think about what we're setting them up for when it comes to that, when it comes to future relationships, romantic relationships, when it comes to their careers and navigating them. I don't want my kid just accepting an answer that doesn't make sense to them from their boss or their teacher, because that's what we have to think about. Do you want a child that doesn't ever question anything in life? No, you don't. So for me, that's why it's so important to also explain the reasoning behind things to my daughter, because then she can start using her own brain mechanisms to decipher when things make sense to her and are justified, and when later in life they aren't justified. So not only, again, does it help the younger kids start to use their brains and learn words and verbiage, but we're then also teaching our kids really important life skills. And just, again, like taking parenting seriously and understanding the fact that we're not just raising little children, we're raising people who are going to be adults one day. And considering the fact that all the lessons that they're learning at home, they are going to, in one way or another, apply them in life later on because they learned it at home. So yeah, thinking critically, basically. Start teaching thinking critically at home. Give your kids the gift of an explanation when they're asking about something. And hey, of course, as kids get older, they're going to talk back. They're going to say things like, that's not fair. And that's when we as parents have to think about modeling things and not getting offended when a kid thinks that something we said isn't fair. If they don't think it's fair, that's okay. They're entitled to that opinion. and letting them know that, but then still sticking our ground if it's a rule in the house. Like, okay, you're entitled to think that's not fair, but that's what it is right here. So yeah, anyways, kind of went on a tangent there, but I think that was a necessary and important tangent when it comes to communication with our kids. To wrap up, I want to remind everyone that parenting is always going to be a customized job. There's no one size fit all formula, and we're all learning as we go. For me, it's about honoring my parents and the things they did for me and that I appreciated, and taking them with me, while also making the necessary shifts for myself that I have learned along the way and that I believe will better serve my children. We pass on what we loved and we evolve where we need to. But before I sign off, I got to finish with my affirmations to help us on this parenting journey. I trust myself to make the best decisions for my children. I trust myself to make the best decisions for my children. I create a safe and loving environment for my children to grow and thrive. I create a safe and loving environment for my children to grow and thrive. I am a model of patience, love, and understanding for my children. I am a model of patience, love, and understanding for my children. I embrace the balance between caring for my children and caring for myself. I embrace the balance between caring for my children and caring for myself. My parenting choices are made with love and the best of intentions. My parenting choices are made with love and the best of intentions. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in today. Let me know what you thought about today's episode and today's format. If you're interested, again, check out that video about discipline versus punishment, and I will either see you over there or in another episode. Take care. Bye, guys.